All right, in this video, we're gonna show you how to effectively and proficiently use an actual strut tamer. A lot of times guys try to rush through this process and they put themselves as well as their buddies in danger from shrapnel flying across the shop. Typically your strut mount up top or something's blown out the bottom, whatever the case may be. Maybe a socket's attached and it goes flying because you're creating a lot of energy compressing the spring down. Now, keep in mind there's two types of springs, the way it oscillates. There's a variable design and then there's non-variable design. This is a non-variable spring. It's the same size all the way through. It's gonna have the same amount of tension all the way through. And it's nice and thick all the way through. The variable rate ones, you're actually gonna notice that it's got a bigger coil on the bottom and it starts to taper and shrink towards the top and it gets tighter. That gives it a variable amount of tension or force as it's oscillating up and down. Which they typically do for comfort. Everything is all about consumer comfort at this point. So the only thing that I'm going to need is going to be an impact, the socket that fits the top, and some kind of attachment to get it out. Now, depending on how blown out your strut is, you might need some kind of vice grips or vice clamps to physically hold the strut rod in the middle. Yes, there is a little 8 to 10 millimeter stud up top. You can try to work this out with a wrench. I do not advise it, to be honest with you. 9 times out of 10, this little stud strips. The nut itself will round out on you. The tool itself is gonna be in your way, the strut tamer I mean. So a lot of times it's literally just easier to get in here with an impact, blow it out, move on with your day. As long as you set this spring up correctly in this strut tamer, there's nothing you need to worry about. When you notice that guys are getting careless and they're trying to be quick about it, go to the other side of the shop for about 15 minutes and watch the danger unfold. Sometimes it's fun to watch, sometimes it's not. You have to make sure that these fingers on the bottom are perfectly lined up with this spring, evenly on all 3 points of interest here. If you do not, if one of these is cockeyed, if it's slightly out, whatever the case may be, that's when things can get dangerous. Don't be afraid to physically turn and manipulate these as well. They slide in and out, but you can also pivot them right to left. So I want to make sure that that is nice and flush in a way to where my strut mount is also flush on top. A lot of strut mounts nowadays are teeter-totter for camber caster purposes when you put them in a car. If you are trying to compress it, your strut mount is not perfectly straight up top, it will also create an angle issue. Yes, this means that your spring is going to be slightly crooked, and that's okay. That's not as dangerous as trying to have your spring straight up and down and your strut mount's cockeyed. That's when something can slide out and it becomes problematic. So once you know and you trust yourself that all of these fingers are lined up where they're supposed to be, now your top ones are not gonna go in between the spring. Because what happens is when you go to actually release it, they can get stuck in there. Now you can't get your tool out. It becomes an even bigger problem. Like you literally will not be able to get your tool out sometimes. So be careful with that, I've seen it. So I'm gonna take my fingers and I'm gonna go directly to the top of the actual strut mount, and I want it to be about as far in as it'll let me go for supportive purposes, and I'm gonna compress this down. By this strut mount also being at an angle, it's gonna allow this nut to be pushed over to the side, and it's gonna make it easier to get it off with an impact as well. So I'm gonna compress this just enough. I'm gonna compress it just enough to where it's actually raising and lifting off of my strut. I got a little bit of wiggle here, but I'm not quite there yet. So I'm gonna keep going until I have nice good separation, and this is no longer attached. It's not under any kind of spring tension anymore at this point. So now would be a really good time to take it off. There is no need to compress this spring all the way. You're just gonna put yourself in a dangerous position. You just need it to come off enough to where it's no longer sitting on the bottom of this strut housing. Now, make sure you have your impact rated socket that fits the nut, and make sure you have an impact rated adapter or attachment. Make sure your air gun is off mode. We're gonna blast this puppy up. Like I said, from time to time, what you might end up having to do is physically hold the actual strut rod in the middle there because that nut doesn't want to come off.